All right. Sorry, so we're live. Welcome everyone to, I think this is our third month of the Nerves remote meetup. Oh, sorry, I'm getting crazy feedback because I had the YouTube tab open and it was like on like an 8-second delay. All right, so we're going to be talking. We have kind of two planned presentations. We actually just got done discussing. I was lazy about getting the call started, but we were just discussing some guard related stuff, kind of general Elixir. But I think it'd be good to maybe kick things off with a let's run around, do quick introductions, and then if you have anything that you have either gotten stuck on with any nerves or Elixir related stuff, and you can either bring it up, or if you just have other questions you're thinking about, we can kind of just run through the group and kind of open questions and just discuss them ahead of doing our presentations. So John, do you want to kick us off?
Like if I have any questions?
Yeah, or just anything you've been running into recently with nerves or Elixir?
So my most recent stuff is I got a Pi 0 and after X number of time, it just shuts off and I have no idea why. So I've been trying to work with, like, how do I get more file system type data on the Pi to try to troubleshoot why power is stopping for some reason, which has involved like a lot of like logging to disk or trying to SFTP files to and from it to get logs and stuff like that. But yeah, that's been my chore.
I'm just curious, was the Pi idle up until leading up to when it shuts itself down?
Yeah, I mean, I have the most basic blinking running script on it. So it's always blinking different patterns, but that's pretty much it. Like, it doesn't do anything, it just sits idle.
And then the blinking also stops when it goes off?
Oh yeah, the whole thing loses power.
That is
weird. It just shuts down.
I did see something a while ago where the networking, so like I didn't have anything blinking on the physical device, but I had like something where I was calling out to the device to ask for something like every 5 minutes, and I noticed that it would go several hours and then all of a sudden it would just stop responding and I'd have to power cycle it. But that just turned out that it was putting the networking stack to sleep when it thought the networking stack was too idle. And there was a way that you could put in a little thing into one of the etc files that basically just tells the kernel, like, hey, you got to wait like 3 hours before you consider the network stack totally idle. And that fixed that one. But I don't know about full system power off. I've never seen that before.
So I got real adventurous and I bought just the base and I soldered on the GPIO pins. So I'm wondering if I just messed it up. Like if I melted some contacts too close.
Is it doing a full power cycle or is it just powering off?
No, it's just totally off.
Is it getting hot?
Nope. Although, the last thing I need to try is a known good cable to like a power brick, like an iPhone power brick or something like that. So I've tried tons of different cables to the computer and tons of different cables I've gotten with various devices that look like old cell phone chargers, basically. But a lot of them have this new, like, everybody's really interested in putting this little switch on those USB micro cables where you can like toggle power on and off. So I was wondering if that was messing it up, but right now I have it to another power source and it's been running all day. So I guess we'll find out.
Yeah, I do wonder if maybe that's in the case that you have it hooked up to a computer, maybe the computer is actually shutting off the USB power for various reasons of the host computer. Yeah, that's interesting. Let us know next month.
I have an extra Cana kit power supply, John. If you're down next week, if you want, I can bring it in. You can try that, see if that makes a difference.
Sure, might as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, I got logging on it, but it was just all basically Elixir and OTP logs. So I still don't have any idea what's happening like more on the the kernel level, which is probably where it's failing.
Oh yeah, that's true, because nerves by default, like it's not actually logging to disk anywhere, huh?
Right.
Interesting. All right. Well, we'll have to leave that one, it sounds like, for the future. Evan, do you want to go next?
Yeah. So, how would you like me to introduce myself? Just.
I mean, probably your name.
I'm Evan. I'm based out of Salt Lake City. Currently, I do not work in Elixir, sadly, but I'm using Nerves to teach myself Elixir. I've learned that this may be the difficult approach to learning it. I've come into a couple problems because of that, but kept going along ever since. Every time I've run into a problem, I've come across a solution relatively quick. So that's kind of me.
I think that's awesome. I mean, I can definitely see how adding learning hardware gotchas at the same time as Elixir gotchas maybe makes the learning curve more steep. But if it's a project that keeps you interested, then there's not really any bad way to learn things, right? It's just,
if anything, I think it's pushed me more into learning it. I've been trying to learn Elixir for a little while, but every time I've started to getting into it again, I have not had a reason to continue. So it always peters off. But with this, it's now like, no, I have a reason now. I'm gonna have a sprinkler system I'm never gonna use because I don't have sprinklers. So
you get to have your own reasons for doing things. All right, Todd, do you want to go next?
Sure. Todd, I'm in outside of Denver, Colorado. I am a full-time Elixirist at work, and I've been playing with hardware for, I don't know, a few years now, but never really built anything complete in Nerves yet. And my latest curiosity was adding an RTC to the Raspberry Pi 3, just for keeping like a real-time schedule, and hopefully tonight will mitigate some of the problems that I'm having.
Awesome. All right, Steve, do you want to go next?
I'm Steve. I live in Mapleton, which is right now at the base of the fire that is burning out of control in South Utah County. So that makes for exciting times. All we really get is smoke here, so we get the worst of everything, but at least we're still here. So, and I don't do Elixir in my day job. I mostly do Ruby. So Elixir is just a fun hobby for now.
Steve. So my name is Michael. I actually am also working full-time Ruby right now, but I tried really hard to get Steve and I was previously working at the same place. Steve is currently working. John's also currently working there. And I tried really hard to get some Elixir stuff off the ground. It sounds like it didn't survive my exit from the company very well. So sorry, Steve. Tried to.
It turned into Golang. It was weird how it just morphed.
Or back to Ruby.
Or back to Ruby.
Which baffles me sometimes, but
Wait, they didn't move Brokaw back to Ruby, did they?
No.
No, they ignore that one, but they moved dispatch. They're like,
Yeah.
oh, we can't figure out why this is working this way, so let's put it back to Ruby. Well, we moved off of Ruby for a reason, guys. Whatever.
All right. Well, in any case, not the purpose of this chat. I mostly, honestly, I don't have a lot of like any major problems that I've been running into recently. So I'm right now, I left that job to jump into this little startup, and my main problem at the moment is how do I not keep getting tempted to work day and night on this project? So I'm running into my first brushes of workaholism and trying to keep that under some level of control. So, and then also we do have kind of the green light there to start some Elixir stuff, but I mean, now it's my job to actually be the one that worries about the trade-off of like, okay, if we start doing it here, it's going to slow down these other things, and trying to just choose the right moment and the right project to start moving things to Elixir. So hopefully I can get to do some more of it again professionally. And then I haven't gotten my sprinklers wired up, or I don't have my Raspberry Pi wired to my sprinkler power lines yet. And that is a good segue to our first presentation. So Jon, in our last meetup, he had a bunch of slides about how do you get all the wiring set up correctly. And unfortunately, he was on maybe the world's like third or fourth most terrible internet connection ever. And so there's a lot of like interruptions and stuff. And so he's going to redo that part of his presentation from last month, which should give all of us a clearer idea of some of the final steps of getting your relays wired up to the sprinkler power lines, and then how that turns into controlling your sprinklers. And then after that, Steve Newell is going to be presenting on SchedEx, which is kind of one methodology for controlling when the valves are turning on and off, and a very time-based approach to that, as far as I understand. So, Jon, do you want to kick us off with your slides then? Take it away.
You bet. So here, I'll get my screen sharing. There we go. We tested this earlier. Can you guys see my fancy slideshow?
Beautifully.
Awesome. I'm on an internet connection that is quite literally 100 times faster than what I was the last meeting. So hopefully this has no hiccups, but let's go over some relays. And it's not very long, so don't worry, guys. But anyway, these relays have essentially 3 ports to them. A normally connected port, meaning that line is always connected to each other, and whatever you put in it's going to complete the circuit. Or I'm sorry, yeah, complete the circuit. There's a common pin, which is just like, you know, what part of the circuit is being completed. And then the normally open is just saying that these two, the common and the normally open gate, don't have any completion. So whatever's in there is going to not initially be flowing through. It's going to be stagnant. So these have a 5-volt trigger. Last time we kind of talked about 5-volt versus 3.3. I've tested with lots of various voltages, and I could get mine to work most of the time. Some of the thoughts were, or the assumptions were, maybe it wears down the relay more if you use less than 5 volts. But anyway, try to get 5 volts if you can. And then also one cool thing to note is that these relays actually have, here I'll go to this, you see this cool red circle down the bottom, you can actually separate the power source to the trigger, what's actually triggering the relays versus what's holding the relays open or closed versus what's triggering the relays. So most of yours should have this jumper on, a VCC and a JDVCC, and it's basically just saying like whatever power you give into these trigger pins, we're just going to jump it over to also open and close the relays. But if you so wanted, you could separate those by pulling the jumper off and giving separate power sources and separate grounds to the VCC and the JVCC. So that's cool. This is...
Sorry, Jon, do you mind, sorry, can I ask a quick question?
Yep.
So going back, if you separate those, would that basically mean that we could take because there is a 5-volt out pin for one of the standard pins on the Raspberry Pi, and you could then use 5 volts as the way, like the power that's going to hold the relay open or closed. But then you would just you would only be triggering with the 3.3 volt, but it wouldn't necessarily wear down the relay since you're using a full 5 volts for actually holding it open and closed. Is that right?
Yeah, that's my assumption. So I did try that too, and it worked. Triggering with 3.3 and then using the 5 volts separate to hold the relays. So yeah.
Awesome. I'll
But
try it out.
Sorry, I'm still not understanding. So I get that part, but we have to actually run 24 volts out to the solenoids. So would we actually then have 3 different power sources there? One to trigger the relay, one to hold the relay open, and then one that's actually switched by the relay?
Yeah. So that's actually going to the next part.
Okay, I'll be
And
quiet.
I had this diagram, but I think I'm gonna go to this one instead. So if you see my fancy 24 volt up here, you actually, all these relays are doing are adding a breakpoint in a circle between the sprinkler and the 24 volt AC. And so you actually you need to run power to and from the relay in order to get the power you need. So in my setup, I've got 4 sprinkler lines. I put this 24 volt AC line in the same gate on each relay that I want to use. It doesn't really matter if you put it in the middle common one or if you put it in the normally open one. I happen to choose the normally open one. And I've chose normally open so that when it powers on, when it first gets power, that gate is going to be by default open and won't trigger all my sprinklers all at once. And then from this common line in the middle, these lines would actually go out to the sprinklers. But the sprinklers themselves also have this common line that comes all the way back to the 24 volt AC. So it completes this whole circle flow of power. And all you're doing in the relay is you're just making a cut point in that line to control when you want power to it and or when you want to cut the power to it.
Okay, so in other words, all of them are getting the one end of the 20 volt AC. They already have that all going to them. And you're just controlling whether or not this, like in the case of zone 1, whether or not that red line will actually get connected to the other side of the 24 volt AC source.
Right.
And so then that's your switch that you're turning on and off is just that one connection there.
Yeah. So the power to trigger and the power to hold the relays is actually totally independent. Which was something I did I spent probably like an hour assuming that if I added power to the JVCC, that it was going to power through the relays for whatever reason. And then, but it does not. It's only for holding the relay open. These ones I think are mechanical relays. You can also get opto. Oh, I've already forgot the word, but they're optical relays that just send light to decide if it's on or off.
Yeah, I think those are called optically isolated or something like that.
Yeah, there's like some fancy opticopter word or something like that. Whatever. Anyway, that's a tangent. But yes.
Optocoupler?
Optocoupler. That's what I was looking for.
That's what you've got at the bottom of your slide there.
Oh, there it is. But I don't think where I got this picture, I don't think these are optocouplers because of how loud the click is.
Okay, so I still don't understand, I guess. So I get the way you've got this wired up here, and I see how that's working. Now, where does the 3.3 volt connection from the GPIO pin connect to this, and where does the 5 volt from the 5 volt pin on the Raspberry Pi connect onto the relay board?
Oops, I don't want to click. Oh man, now I gotta go all through it again. So all the pins, can you see my mouse moving? No. I wish I could draw on this.
No, I wonder if I can draw on that.
Oh, so the pins go in that bottom connector.
Yeah, at the very bottom of this relay picture, right in the middle, there's this little black rectangle looking things. These are where all those pins are.
Okay.
And on either end, there's a ground on the left end and a VCC on the right end.
Okay.
And that powers, and then all these other pins are the triggers, and then they correlate to a number, which relay it is.
Got it. Okay.
And that's
So
what powers it. And so what we're saying is that currently, if you send power down here to all these pins, over here on the right, we've got a jumper on between VCC, which is the power to all these pins from the Raspberry Pi, and that just jumps using the same power to actually hold the gate open or close.
Got it. Yeah, but if you switch it to the other one, then it'll actually run. You'll actually have to run a line from the 5-volt out on the Pi into the VCC pin on the relay, and that's what it will actually send to the relays. Got it. Okay. And I think you explained that to me when you were down before, John. I just didn't understand it enough to know what was going on. So thanks for going through that again.
No problem. So yeah, so in my initial line of the 24-volt AC, they're just daisy chained together, just to share the power, share the love. So I got one more. There's my common wire. So here is my actual sprinkler setup with my beautiful controller box I built in 20 minutes. These are where I have the sprinkler zone wires coming out, and then also where I'm daisy chaining the power. This cool little blue line is 1/2 of my 24-volt AC. If you could tell where this blue line is ending at the controller, it's kind of split into a Y. That's my single 24-volt AC power line coming in, split in between two. So one of those is the power. The other one is connected to this common line. But my controller, where the common line comes in from the sprinklers, it looks like a normal sprinkler wire. It's just with the same stuff. My controller just couples that together and has 2 separate contact points for it, for whatever reason. So yours may be the same, or you may need to figure out which one's your common wire and connect it just to the other end of the 24-volt AC. Oh shoot. Are there any questions on this part?
I'm just curious, where are these just like clearly labeled on your controller, or did you use like a multimeter or something like that to figure out which ones are 24 volts, which ones are signals, etc.?
My controller zones were clearly labeled. Like it's really blurry, but where that circle common wire is, there's actually a C, and then all the other wires are 1, 2, 3, and 4. So they're pretty easy. I did have to get a multimeter though to test with which one of these split lines, like the end of this blue line into my controller, which one of those was connected to common versus just the hot wire.
Yeah.
But it was pretty easy. It was like, I mean, I got a multimeter out, but if you don't have one, you could just plug one in and turn on a zone. And if it doesn't turn it on, plug it to the other one, and it probably will, you know.
So
50 shot.
I have the same sprinkler controller that you have. So did you need to hook up that second wire, the non-24-volt wire that comes from the power adapter?
Yeah.
Okay. And that just was the common, or that just went to the common, or?
So I didn't have to touch the common here. I just found whichever one was the hot lead, whichever one was not connected to common, and I ran it over to my relay. In fact, I just plugged it into my relay, and then I daisy chained it across all the other parts, and I did exactly that. I turned a zone on, and then I touched one of my screw leads for the 24 volt, didn't turn on. Then I touched the other one, and it did, and that's where I kept it.
Sorry, what did you do with the other lead that comes from that power adapter then?
So nothing. And
okay.
That other lead, this controller has some internal workings to connect the common to the other lead, just behind the controller box. So I really didn't have to do anything to that. I just needed one wire from one of these 24 volt leads, and then plugged all the zones in, and everything worked.
Does anyone else ever get this weird feeling like we're using software to trigger an electrical relay, which is sending power to what like solenoids are basically just like physical relays, right? It's just a way of letting the water pass through or not pass through. Like maybe, I don't know. This is maybe just occurring to me for the first time, and all of you guys have already thought about this, but it's just occurring to me that like this is a lot of turtles all the way down.
Yeah. So I only have 4 zones, which means I have 4 more relays I can play with, and I actually connected 2 of my garage doors to them. Because garage doors are kind of the same thing. They're really not that smart. And to open a garage door, you just have to short a line, add power to it, and take it out. And then ta-da.
So I had one. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Nope, that was it. I was just saying, so it was super easy to get my garage connected to all this, and now I can open and shut my garage with my phone. That's an important life goal.
This Raspberry Pi is working overtime for you. So one question I had was where you brought in that common line to your Pi to the relays, and then Daisy changed it across. What like gauge is that wire? I'm basically wondering if I just tried to like mock this out using the same kinds of wires that we are using on the GPIO pins, is 24 volts just going to like totally fry that wire or cause a problem? Or is that good enough to try to get things working?
I'm not sure. So when I was installing this, we got 2 new ceiling fans in our house. And if you've ever installed a ceiling fan, they come with like 10 feet of wire to be able to support like hanging really far from the ceiling. But mine are really close. We cut all that off, and I had like probably 10 extra feet of wire. So this is basically whatever that ceiling wire is, because I figured if those can handle 110 volts, that 24 will be no big deal. But when I was buying other stuff for the garage, I just got some 20 gauge wire, which is about what's used for your thermostat or what's even used for the sprinklers, and that's been working fine as well.
Okay.
And I just
find some of that somewhere.
I just have some 8 conductor sprinkler wire. You can buy it at any sprinkler supply system by the foot, and it has the individual wires color coded right gauge, and they're all bound in a single bundle.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure those are all just 20 gauge, right?
They're
think
just kind of, yeah.
My sprinkler wire that I got is 18, I think.
Yeah.
That's for really beefy sprinklers only.
I don't know. I just ordered it from Amazon, but my wire stripper, has the gauge number on it, and I chose the little slot that said 18, and it seemed to strip it correctly. So I assume they're 18 gauge wires.
I love how much expertise is on this call.
I was going to say, sometimes some electrical engineer is going to get on here and just run away screaming.
Probably.
When we start talking about optocopters.
So I did find out a fun fact about insurance and using relays. Is that insurance is very controlling about electrical systems. And so, because I had pulled out my light switch onto this too to control a garage light, and then I started investigating and thought maybe I will try to do something more official. But basically, if it's external and you've modified without a professional electrician certified to do work like this, and if it catches on fire, then they just say, well, it sucks for you. Like, you messed with it.
I mean, I guess that kind of makes sense. I would expect that if someone was just like down in their basement, like connecting wires together, and something bad happened, that you're not specifically insuring against that as a default.
Yeah, it's probably there for that exact reason, because somebody probably did that. Daisy chain, surge protector on surge protector, 50 down the line.
Stay out of my basement, John.
Okay, so sorry, did you want me to keep on this?
I'm good. Anyone else have questions?
Nope, good.
So that's pretty much it. And since I got a pack of 2 relays, I actually mounted one on this wood block with the breadboard and some LEDs, and I just made this little test block that I can, whenever I got to change, I have a bunch of Raspberry Pis. So I'll deploy like a dev image to one of those, and I run through a test suite that just lights LEDs on a schedule in succession. And it'll actually send multiple messages. And so I have a little gen server that's handling those, and it'll go through it back to backs. That's pretty much it. That's actually been really helpful. So I don't have to like troubleshoot my code with real sprinklers in my yard.
That's pretty cool. I was actually, I know in a previous call we were talking about like it would be bad to open multiple sprinklers because there's not going to be enough pressure to really do them. It occurred to me after that call that you could, rather than actually scheduling each gen server independently, that maybe you could actually have one gen server which is in charge of choosing who's active, and it will enforce that it's only going to send the activate message to one pin at a time, and then wait to get a confirmation that it has become deactivated before activating the next one. And so you could just use a gen server kind of as the lock, if you will. Just curious if anyone else has tried anything like that.
So mine kind of does that. Mine just, whenever it gets asked to turn something on, it just asserts or shuts everything off and then turns that one on. So it basically just cleans house anytime you need to make a change.
Nice.
So I don't have this completely implemented yet, but the way, and I'll show this a little bit more when we get into the SchedEx stuff, but I actually have it scheduled, I turn it on and then turn that zone off again, and on and then off explicitly, just the individual zone, and hope that it works. But it may be that once I actually get going that's not going to happen.
Cool. Well, maybe is that the right segue, John? Should we switch over to have Steve?
Oh yeah, sorry. That's all I got, guys. So if there's no more questions, then Steve can tell us how to schedule it.
All right. Virtual clapping over the internet for that presentation. Thanks, John.
Yes. It was very helpful, John. I learned some things.
Magic happens when you have the correct internet.
Virtual clap for your internet connection as well.
Or as we like to call them, mic-sized claps.
Oh, it burns. All right, Steve. Well, then you better get something better than a mic-sized clap.
Doubtful. Okay, so actually, go back to. Can you see my screen? Let's do this one and this one. Okay, so can you see my browser?
Yes, I see it.
Okay, so first thing I just wanted to talk about real quickly is I think Todd was the one that asked about it in the Slack channel about a real-time clock. Fred released this Nerves Time package that basically it's not real-time, but it's near real-time, right? It uses NTP servers to keep your clock synced, and just does it. I mean, it's built into Unix, and it just does it for you. So I tested it just to make sure that it actually would install and run, and it seems to run without any, I didn't have to do anything other than add it to my deps and mix deps get, and it ensures that the NTP daemon is running in the background, and it syncs to the default NTP servers. You can change those if you need to, and it'll keep your clock current to within. I mean, I've never seen drift of more than a second or two.
Nice.
And I think for these purposes, I mean, if we were trying to control robots and be super precise, we'd probably want real-time control, you know, a real-time operating system. But for sprinklers, if you're a couple of seconds late turning them on or off, I don't think it's a big deal. So I don't have the need for real-time. So this will do everything I need it to do. And so that's my thought there. Questions? Does that work for you, Todd?
Yeah, I wasn't reaching for that immediately just because I'm more used to using RTC chips, but you're probably right that with the hardware that we're using and the use case that we have, this would be the much easier way to go rather than waiting for Frank to add support for a real-time clock.
Right. Yeah, and from my point of view, again, I mean, real time to me is within a second or two, and that's close enough. So anyway, so that's what I'm using there. And then the other package that I'm using is this one called SchedEx, and I first ran across this at, I think it was at the MPEX Elixir. One of the authors of this package wrote a drum machine using SchedEx just to demonstrate the control that he had, the fine grain control. And it was significantly more complex than anything I needed to do for schedules, but it seems to make the most sense to me to do it. I toyed with, you know, building my own gen server and just starting a timer and sending a message every time it was time to transition, and that would certainly work and may in some senses be easier. But SchedEx lets me lets me configure it using cron tabs, which is something that I'm familiar with and have used before, and it seems to make sense to me. So that's what I'm doing. And it's simply, you simply create a supervisor, and then you can either statically schedule all of the, you know, your zone schedule if you need to, or if you want to, you can, you know, schedule them statically in code, or the way I chose to do it, and I'll show you that in a second, but I chose to do it dynamically, where I created an external data structure that I call a schedule, and each schedule has many zones. And there are times associated, you know, a start time associated with the schedule and days of week to run that schedule. And then each zone has a duration, is what I call it, a length of time that each zone is going to run. And so then I just simply at startup time go through each of the schedules that are defined in my system and generate, you know, something like this, a child spec for each of those zones, and register them with the supervisor that I've got created, and then walk away. And SchedEx just handles all the timing stuff for me. So for me, the hardest part was getting this generated from my schedule. So I just take a second and show you that. Can you see my terminal, or are you still seeing my browser?
I'm still seeing the browser right now.
Okay, so let me change that. Let's see here.
Sure.
And there we go. You see the terminal now?
Yep.
Is it big enough? Can you read it?
Maybe a little bit bigger.
What's that?
It looks best when all the lines get skew-bumpus. That's my favorite. But yeah, this is readable.
Okay. So I have created this right here is my schedule. Is the days to run. I specified it as Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or MWF. But then crontab wants it in the form of a 0 for Sunday through 6 for Saturday. So there's some code to convert that and give it a name. I created this seconds between zones simply because my sprinkler solenoids actually take almost 30 to 45 seconds to shut down before the next, when I turn off one zone and turn on the next one, it takes almost a minute sometimes for the first sprinkler to turn off.
Do you have pretty big zones with a lot of pressure?
I do.
Is that why it's okay?
I think so, yeah, because mine, so I have 12, currently I have 12 zones in my yard. We have a huge yard. And each one of them has between 6 and 10 sprinklers, either pop-ups or the Rainbird style. Sorry, you getting a lot of background noise? Hear me?
Yeah, sorry,
just a little bit.
Okay, sorry. I'm in the kitchen and we're just finishing cleaning up the kitchen too. So mine takes some time. So I just built in a way to specify the time in seconds that I call my offset or my buffer between zones. So when I create the schedule, I actually will build that in between each zone to wait that amount of time. Start time when I read the schedule, and then simply an array of zones. And for this purpose, I just have 2 zones. And each zone has a time in seconds, how long it's going to run, an ID and a name. And then, let's see. Whoa. Doesn't like Tmux.
Steve, can I ask just a couple of questions real quick?
Yep. I mean, I have answers, but please ask.
In the zones part of that data structure, you have this ID zone 1. Is that like what identifies the gen server that you're going to send the activation message to? Yeah.
So one of the things that one of my kind of design requirements is that currently, as I said, I have 12 zones, but they're split across 2 different controllers. So on one controller, I have zones 1 through 8, and then on my downstairs controller, I have zones 1 through 4, which is confusing to me. So I want to actually be able to give them names as well. And so I will, there's a layer above this that actually determines which controller the schedule belongs to, and we'll send that schedule to the specific controller. So I've got a Raspberry Pi Zero that I'll have hooked up downstairs to my 4-zone controller, and then my main controller out of the garage will be powered by, I happen to have a Raspberry Pi 3 that I'll control that one with. But because each of them will have a zone 1 or a zone 2 or zone 3, I also wanted to be able to give them a name so that I can say, front flower beds, or, middle front lawn and front sidewalk and that kind of thing, to name the zones so that I know what they are. But internally, the gen servers are going to use that atom to turn it on and off.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I mean, I don't have that big of a yard, but even so, I'm constantly like, wait, is that sprinkler in zone 5 or is it in zone 4?
Yeah, I dread the first weekend of the year in the spring when I have to go through and turn on all my sprinklers and make sure they're all working and try to remember, okay, now if I turn zone 1 on, where do I have to go to see which sprinkler heads are broken, So I actually have on the garage wall next to my controller 2 or 3 different maps that I've drawn over the years. And we've been in this house 20 years. And so things have changed. And sprinkler wires are broken. I've put in new controllers several times. And I can never remember which is the most current map. And so Hopefully this will help solve that problem.
I'm going to take the time to document this and not the time to erase my old documentation.
Exactly. To the
True
point now
software
I'm
engineer.
just going to have to paint my wall every year so that I erase the old one and can draw a new diagram. But yeah, so anyway, so the short answer is, yeah, the zone is the atom. The ID atom is what I'm using to turn the valves on and off in a gen server.
Awesome. And then I maybe you're about to go over this, and if you are, just ignore my question. But do you, when you're converting this structure into the SchedEx individual like tasks or jobs or whatever they're called, do you actually end up generating? You actually end up converting the start time plus the seconds between time plus the duration into like an actual start time for each zone?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so let me show you that real quick. So I tried to do this with with enumerators, and I couldn't, so I ended up having to do this recursively. But I don't have it. So I've got this method in my schedule module called child specs. It takes a schedule and it breaks.
Oh, child specs. I think you just forgot to pluralize the function then.
Thank you. Pair programming. So yeah, so then it decomposes the child or the schedule into these different tasks. So I've got an ID, and you'll see this looks very, very similar to the SchedEx documentation. So to the child spec that you need to start the gen server in SchedEx is it takes an ID, and the reason you have that ID is so that if you ever want to cancel that task, you'd cancel it by ID. And so you can see that I have a start task and a stop task for each zone. And that goes to what I was talking about earlier, where it just seemed to make sense to me that I want to turn on a zone, and then 20 minutes later, 45 minutes later, whatever, I actually just want to turn that one off and assume that the default state for my controllers is off. So if I lose power to the relays, for example, it will open all the relays, and any sprinklers that happen to be on will get turned off. And so I felt like, and I haven't tested this yet, but I felt like I was safe just saying I'm going to turn on a specific zone, and then at the end of the time that I want that zone to run, I'll explicitly turn just that one off and not have to worry about resetting all the zones. So my particular implementation is for every zone that I have in my schedule. So if you look at the sched here, I've got 2 zones, but you'll see I actually generate 4 tasks for those 2 zones: a start and a stop, and then a start and a stop. And you can see, so the SchedEx package requires that you have a start atom that takes a tuple that takes SchedEx as the first is the first parameter, and then run every is an atom that tells it this is a repeating task. You can also do run once, and there's a number of them there you can set. But for my purposes, I want it to run over and over and over and over again. I don't want to have to reschedule this every time one schedule finishes. I just want to set it up at boot time, and then you pass it. It calls it an MFA, a module, which is this, a function, and then the arguments. And so I've got a FW or firmware.valve module and there's a turn on method, and then I pass it the zone that I want to turn on, and then the cron tab that's associated with it. So if we look down here at zone 1 here, see it should run for 1200 seconds. And my my schedule should start at 11:30 p.m. and I've got a 60-second offset. And so that's why the beginning time is at 23:31, because it's a little bit of a bug, but not enough that I care enough to fix it really. It's adding the offset to the beginning, to the start task each time, and that compensates for the delay between zones that I need. So it'll run. The first one will turn on at 23:31 on the first, third, and fifth day of the week, because I told it I wanted it to run Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And then it'll turn off 20 minutes later, or 1200 seconds later. And so there's the off time, turning off at this time. And then because the start time is here, and there's a bug. Interesting. I had to offset the days that it's running. And this one's actually a bug. It shouldn't be 246 yet. It should still be 135. But you can see here, this one starts at midnight or 12:30 on Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday.
Is this a new form of testing? Is that you just give a presentation and that's when you actually noticed all the things that are wrong?
Presentation-driven development. I find that public humiliation is the best way to ensure that my code is good. So that's pretty much it for me. The next step, and full disclosure, I haven't done it yet. The next step is to take this output here and just simply then create a dynamic it's late. Call my dynamic supervisor and then call start child on that, and that will add that gen server and run it for me. Nice.
One quick question I had is, do you have any of this code pushed up? I mean, is your scheduler module, is it part of the same project that also has firmware.valve defined, or are they separate projects?
Yeah, so I actually did it. My project's called Deluge. And this would be something that would be interesting to talk about on another one of these calls. But my original thought was I'd create an umbrella app, but that seemed awful heavy. So I'm actually just, what do they call them? Poncho apps? So I just created it that way. So I've got this firmware module in my library, or firmware namespace in my lib folder, and the scheduler, and then I've got a UI that I don't have anything in yet, but probably will be a Phoenix app. Although Jon turned me on to that. What is that? ScreenX? What was it?
Scenic?
Jon? Scenic, yeah. That looks pretty cool. So I may play with that one. But
why not both?
What's that?
Why not both?
Because I'm slow and I don't think I can get both of them written. But yeah, they both seem fun. So the FW module is where the control stuff is for the valves. So I've got a valve module in there, and that's also where Blinky is. And then in my scheduler app, that's what knows just about the schedules. So that's how I build it. But I think it would. I'm still a little bit, because I'm not doing this full time. I'm still a little bit unclear about the pros and cons between umbrella apps versus the poncho apps. Like Uncle Bob is the one that.
So I actually just recently watched Dave Thomas MPEX talk from May, and now I'm even like more torn because he's like very passionate about the organization as is being even more wrong, and he has other strong words and opinions. So now I keep looking at these things and going, oh yeah, that this comment did kind of make sense. Maybe I don't.
Yeah. So.
Sorry, go ahead, John.
No, that's
anyway. So
it.
that's how I structured it. I'm not sure if it's right, but it's working so far.
Yeah, for what it's worth, I think umbrella apps have sort of fallen out of favor, and also the idea of a poncho app I think was created by one of the Nerves core guys, Greg Mefford. So I think that's actually, if it's not being used in the Phoenix Elixir Phoenix world, I think in the Nerves world it's pretty much the way that those guys are doing or solving this sort of architectural problem.
Well, I could say from my point of view, the poncho app just seemed a little bit easier for me to wrap my head around. The umbrella app seemed to have a lot more stuff associated with it that really kind of served no other purpose other than to confuse me.
Yeah, I'll just say I did deploy one full app to production that was a true umbrella app, and I can understand some of the original intentions behind it. So things like if you're in the root of your umbrella app, you can just run mix test. It'll go find and all the other test suites and run them one by one, right? So that kind of stuff I think was kind of the original intent, but it introduced so many little edge cases about like, oh, well, if you run mix test in the root, then it's going to run through the configurations, load all the configuration scripts from each of the projects, and then run all your tests. Mm-hmm. And that's a different set of configuration than if you run mix test just inside of one of the child projects. And all those kinds of little edge cases felt like they were more costly than the slight benefits of it being all connected together.
Right.
So I've tended ever since, and also I was heavily influenced by Dave Thomas. Not so much his MPEX talk, but he had that the video course Elixir for Programmers, which I went through along with some coworkers so that they could learn Elixir. And I found that structure really compelling, just to say, well, it's just a mixed dependency that happens to live right next door.
Right, and it seems to make the most sense to me. So that's how I'm leaning now. But I'd love to hear arguments the other way as well. I have a couple other things that I'd like to propose as topics, if that's okay, and you guys can shoot me down. But I'd love to hear a little bit more. I think John's got this implemented, but just the different environments, the dev deploy versus the production deploy kind of thing. That makes sense?
Yeah.
Because one of the things I'm running into is that, for example, currently when I was playing with the Nerves time module, if I install that in my standard, my mix ESS in my depths, it doesn't run on OS 10, which is my development environment, because NTPD is already running somewhere, and so you can't restart it. So it causes problems. So I'd like to have a different configuration for my local versus when I actually deploy it to the firmware. So that's one thing I think would be interesting to me. And if nobody else wants to hear about it, then that's fine. I'll go figure it out on my own, or talk to John offline or whatever. But I think that would be interesting. And there was one other that I thought would be helpful to me. Oh, I've forgotten it. Never mind. Senior moment.
I'll just give a quick thumbs up. I would also just like to hear about like multiple different approaches. maybe what we do is we say next month can be, maybe we'll do like a little bit of show and tell at the beginning. Everyone can give an update on where their project is so far. And then we'll spend the remainder of the time just going over like what kinds of dev or test environment stuff do you have working? And can you show a quick example of how you're organizing that? Because I just think it'd be interesting to see kind of multiple different approaches to, in Jon's case, a full hardware like test harness, and then maybe other people having like a local development where they don't pull in all the depths and it's just for unit testing things, or I don't know. I've heard of lots of different approaches kind of on that spectrum, and I would just be interested to see what things people are using.
I do remember another thing I would love to see, because I don't work in Elixir full time. The testing story still doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. So I would love to see how you guys are writing specs to test this stuff, and how you're mocking the hardware, obviously, and what layers you're testing, and what you're not testing, and that kind of thing. That would be interesting to me as well. But again, if I'm the only one who has questions about that, if you guys have it all figured out, then that's fine too.
Sorry, I'm just taking some notes because I was planning on asking at the end of this meetup what are other topics that people are interested in. So just taking a few notes on those two. I think it's worth going over testing. That's maybe I'm saying that only because it's like the first topic that's been proposed that I'm like, oh, I feel like I could maybe contribute something to that conversation. So I'll double down on that one. And sorry, quickly, Steve, did you say your Deluge code? Do you have a repo pushed up to GitLab or GitHub or something for that?
I do. It's not current yet, but I will fix that embarrassing bug, and then I will push it up and post a link in the Slack channel.
Awesome. Yeah, I would like to look at it, and then maybe I can just open a PR against that, introducing some tests, and that could be the basis of a follow-up there.
That would be awesome.
First test, make sure that the zone 2 is scheduled for Monday, Wednesday, Friday.
Exactly. Oh my.
Anyone else have topics or things they're thinking about that they would like to see presentations on? I mean, it can be things that you want to present on, or maybe just a topic you're interested in, and we could see if we can find someone in the community to come in and present on it.
So I at least have something that I would like to see. We talked earlier on about introducing sensors, maybe like moisture sensors for the grass or something like that. And I've looked into this a little bit further, and I feel like I just don't understand enough about hardware to know where to even start, because it's not like you can just plug something in and it goes. So maybe a further depth introduction into how that works. I don't know it past that, but
Evan, remind me again where you're located.
Salt Lake City.
So this was super helpful for me, but while Jon lives in Idaho, he does come home to Utah periodically. And you're going to be here next week, aren't you, Jon?
Yeah, I'll be there all week. Or I'm sorry, till Thursday.
Try the veal. Sorry.
That was such a dad joke.
Yeah, what can I say? If you want to come, Jon and I both work at a company that's right at the point of the mountain. If you want to come down for lunch one day,
yeah,
I'm going to volunteer Jon to show you how to hook up the hardware. What do you think, Jon?
Sounds good to me.
I think
that's why Jon only comes down once in a while, because he gets volunteered for stuff he doesn't necessarily want to do.
So at a really basic level, Evan, like the moisture sensor and a lot of other sensors are going to adjust the amount of voltage they send through. and the way a moisture sensor works is it sends voltage out of one little metal prong, and it detects how much it receives on the other side. And so it'll send back a float between 0 and 1. And so that's basically you have to figure out what that means in terms of, 1 would be the most moisture and 0 would be the least. And so you hook that up to one of your pins, one of your IO pins, and then using Nerves AL in this case, you would have to read the voltage from that pin. So if you say like read this pin, it'll give you a number somewhere between 0 and 1.
I see. And then it's up to you to interpret what 0 and 1 and what everything in between is.
Yeah. And that's the way a lot of sensors work. It's using one wire, so it's basically just sending you a varying level of voltage on that wire.
So it is more plug and play than I thought it would be.
Yeah, this stuff is really dumb. It's like really, really dumb. So
I think the main differences you get through is like for these relays, we either turn on a high or a low signal, which is a binary action. But some of these sensors you create a link so that you can detect when there's a change in voltage and then make your assertions off of that. So it's a little more, I guess, dynamic, you'd say, where you're constantly reading off of it rather than, triggering a high or low one time and then triggering it back whenever you feel like it.
Okay.
I think it would be good though to maybe have, and by the way, I think it's really fun that a lot of us are working on controller related projects. I do think it's good to kind of keep. It makes it easy to have shared context when we're doing presentations and stuff. But the Nerves remote meetup definitely will over time become less sprinkler specific and branch out to just other areas of Nerves. And so I think would be totally appropriate to say like, hey, let's have a presentation. If someone's done temperature sensors before, they can kind of do a walkthrough of that, or right, and then we extrapolate that and kind of convert it to the project you're working on at the moment.
So I've got some magnetic sensors that I'm putting on doors and a garage door and stuff. That might be, I guess I could probably talk about some of that hookup too.
I think that'd be awesome.
Cool. I also was really interested in like putting a screen on a Nerves device. Mm-hmm. So I actually got one of the Raspberry Pi touchscreens, and I've been trying to play with that. And after I got it, was trying to get things working, and they ended up at ElixirConf doing like a whole class. One of the training sessions for 2 days was all about interfacing with that screen. So that might be another fun topic to do, like make a simple UI, add a little touchscreen, see what you can do with it, or how you might want to implement it. I don't know. I don't know what my end goal is going to be besides like doing it. Just saying that I can do it.
Yeah, I +1 that one, and I'd love to see a scenic UI on a touch screen. A little touch screen on the front of each of these controllers. I think that would be very cool.
Then our controllers would all be significantly higher quality than all of the ones that our houses came with.
The ones that we had to pay $200 for?
Yes.
Work half the time?
Yeah.
So
I kind of want to get...
Sorry, one other topic I want to throw out there, just if you guys haven't heard of it yet, is Nerves Hub.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds so cool.
Okay, so it sounds like everybody else has already checked it out. So, but yeah, it looks pretty awesome.
I forget, and then I get reminded like late at night when I'm browsing through content and should be sleeping, and then I forget again. So I haven't actually looked that in depth into it, except that it exists and it seemingly looked cool.
I haven't used it obviously because it's still new, but it seems to be very similar in concept to another project called Resin.io that I have used, and it's just magic. It really feels like magic. We deployed a remote temperature sensing system in Cambodia, and I was able to monitor it and push code to it, and restart the system from my browser, and it's just It's amazing. So I'm excited to kick the tires on that Nerves Hub.
I think, I mean, it does sound like everyone's at least roughly familiar with the concept, but I think it would be a very good presentation topic just to show one working end-to-end example. I think a lot of times Meetup presentations, some of the best ones are just taking something that people are roughly familiar with and just breaking it down to one concrete example, because it kind of demystifies it. You know, like I've been interested in SchedEx for a long time, and I would look at the README and kind of like walk away. And just seeing like one very concrete example where I understand the context kind of demystifies it or makes it more approachable for me personally. So I'd be a big fan if anyone has a project where they get Nerves Hub working. That would be very interesting to me. Another topic that I'm somewhat interested in, and maybe a little bit more professionally interested in, is the whole idea of Phoenix Live View, which apparently is also like being explored in these other projects like Texas and what's the other one called? Bard or something like that. Anyway, the concept is basically like, hey, you do stateful rendering of things on the server and just push down diffs to the browser so that you can get React-ish sort of what right now can only be done or only is mostly done with crazy build tools and pipelines of build tools and compiling megabytes worth of JavaScript. And instead, can I just do that with like stateful actors, right? And to me, that sounds like a major productivity win as someone who's been struggling with JavaScript quite a bit recently. And so so maybe I've been thinking about doing something like a Phoenix app, which is kind of giving me feedback from the controller and basically keep some connection open to the controller, and it's kind of streaming data back, and then that could stream data to a browser interface that's just showing what's going on with my sprinklers, which zones are on, how long have they been on, things like that.
Yeah, I think that'd be cool to look into. Like, as I'm talking about this Raspberry Pi touchscreen, that's also one of my goals, is I want to be able to just carry it around and then plug into a Pi that I have somewhere and then start seeing data off that Pi. So that could be something incorporated with there.
Oh, so you're not even wanting it to be a permanent thing. You're wanting to be able to go from Pi to Pi, just plugging in a screen.
Yeah, I mean, I have all these grand ideas, and we'll see what I get to. But one of them is like, can I even do touch stuff? And then the other is, well, can I make all my Pis have some sort of general API? And if I plug into it, I can start getting output from them and touch around and tap to do stuff.
That would actually sound super cool to me.
Except for me, I mean, I envisioned that as well, but the touchscreen I want to use for all of that is my phone.
Yeah, but phone, that's so 5 years ago, Steve. We all know we could build a web app and we can do it on our phone super easy. But how often can you make it happen on a touchscreen you plug in?
Well, yeah, so for...
Wired is the new wireless, Steve.
You can't make age jokes at me, John. I'm a protected class. As Brandon me daily. So for my use case, my thought is I'm going to attach a screen to each of my Raspberry Pis, and it'll be there. But one of my use cases is that, often I'll be out in the yard and I need to test I just replaced a sprinkler head and I need to turn on that zone. And I don't want to have to hoof it back to the garage. I just want to turn it on from my phone. So that's my use case.
Sorry, one more. I just thought of one more topic that's also on my list. Integrating with connected systems like Alexa and Google Home.
Yeah.
I have like a really basic, stupid Alexa, what do they call it? Skill that just says "Hello World." But I think it would be fun to be like, turn on sprinkler zone 1, open my garage.
Yeah.
Get even more lazy. So.
Yeah, and I'd love to. So we have Google Home here, and I would love to be able to, because it happens every time it rains. My wife will roll over the night and hear it's raining and nudge me and say, hey, the sprinklers are going to go on and it's raining, turn them off. I'd love to be able to just tell Google Home to turn off my sprinklers. Or better yet, teach her to tell Google Home to turn off the sprinklers.
Yeah.
So Steve, I'm debating with myself here. Is that a level of marriage that I just haven't attained yet? Where it's worth waking up your partner about watering during the rainstorm? Or is that a level of marriage I don't want to attain to?
Yeah, don't aspire.
So just quickly, sorry, this is like a ton of really interesting topics. I'm thinking that we should set up another call for October 17th. That's like not super close to the beginning or the end of the month. It would be another Wednesday evening at the same time, 4 weeks from today. Can I just get a quick thumbs up, thumbs down? Does that work for most people on the call?
Works for me.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, great. I'll go ahead and schedule that. And is there anybody that wants to present on any of these topics, or that they already know they want to present something, or should we just let people kind of message me throughout this next month?
That.
Yeah, I think the last, like, let's see which one I actually focus on, and if I get anything worth presenting.
Okay, sounds good. Well, I will probably start on, Steve, whenever you get that repo up to date, just send me a message on Slack.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll need to come in for lunch sometime. We can meet for lunch, just for whatever reason, to talk about it.
Yeah.
And so I might start there and try to introduce a little bit of tests and then kind of reuse that inside of my project. So I'll kind of roughly start working on that one. And at least have some ideas around that question of like a dev environment or a staging environment, sort of a concept. And so I'll be looking into those two at least. I think if anybody else wants to look into any form of sensors, moisture, temperature, magnetic sensors, or touch screens, or Nerves Hub, or Phoenix UIs, whatever, I think just anyone who's making any progress on those, just shoot me a quick message or comment in the Slack group, and we'll get those set up for the next time.
Awesome. One other thing for me to add to your list there, Michael.
Yeah.
So super easy to control all these things from within, my home network. But it would be interesting to talk about different ways to configure, tunneling or whatever we're doing, so that when I'm at work, I can control my sprinklers. When I'm on a different network, I can get through there. Does that make sense?
So your wife can call you when it's raining and
yes,
goes on.
Exactly. Don't mock me.
Hey.
You too will achieve this level.
I just got, another decade or so marriage before I get there. So let's, I'm also, to me, I think that falls a little bit into this context of like, what are good ways to get, well, I guess for me personally, getting a read-only view of what's going on with my Nerves project on some sort of like widely available or publicly available Phoenix UI is kind of my step one to that. And then my step two would be like the ability to do remote control over that same line of communication. But then is there a good way to do, like you said, can you just do tunneling and then just trust the connection right off the bat? Or do you need to do some sort of authentication or et cetera, et cetera? So
yeah, I think something on just maybe general IoT security would be beneficial for me.
I know Nerves Hub is planning on tackling a lot of this because of their client-side SSL certs.
Right.
But I don't know if that's going to be actual message passing or if it's just planning on doing like new firmware or anything like that. So that may be something to research as well when it comes to Hub. Great.
Also, Dorian Carter, who was on last month, he was running Tonight Conflicted with the Chicago Elixir Meetup group. I think that's the one that he runs, and he was presenting, so he wasn't able to make it tonight. But last time he did mention that he had sort of a Phoenix project, which was about saying like, here's all these different little kind of like nerves sort of things running on different Pis, and some sort of overarching architecture where he had a Phoenix app that each of the Pis would open a WebSocket connection to, and use that as the bidirectional communication. And so maybe he has some thoughts along these lines as well. So I'll reach out to him, see if he wants to weigh in on any of this.
Awesome.
All right. Well, I want to just wrap up and just say a quick and massive thank you to everyone on the call tonight and everyone that's been on the previous months. I'll just say, as I've been battling with my first run-ins with workaholism, it's been super nice to have this meetup to look forward to, which is, it's purely a for fun thing. I think for almost all of us on the call, Nerves is mostly just a for fun thing. And it's super nice to have friends to hang out with once a month and who are also just doing something for fun and just something that's interesting. So big thanks from me, and I hope it's also valuable to each of you and to other people who keep an eye on it remotely.
I agree. And Evan, I'll reach out to you on Slack, and we'll find a time when you can come on down for lunch when John's around.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Okay. Cool.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you, everyone, and we will see you all then on October 17th.
Awesome. Thanks, Michael.
Okay. Night, everyone. See you later.
See you guys.